is just our animation students who are interested in pursuing in the summer and the fall. I want to welcome you to this event. My name is Brad Statlin. You guys have probably heard from me before or seen me before, but really who I want to welcome is Chris Tedin. He's our lead faculty member for visual effects and animation. So today's going to be laid back. We just know you guys are all stuck at home. It's like week 11. I've been going crazy, but I'm a creative. Chris is a creative. I see we have Kyle, we have Hannah, we have Joey, we have more joining. You know, sometimes it's good to take a break from our normal lives and surround ourselves with other creatives. And that's what this series is all about. We're going to have tons of events up until you start school with us. But this one, I just wanted to get Chris Tedin in to talk about 3D modeling, animation. But really, this is laid back. You could unmute yourself. You could turn your camera on. If you have questions, just speak up, or you could put it in the chat box if you don't want to speak up. So feel free, Chris Tedin, if you want to get started and kind of explain what we're looking at.
Yeah, what are we looking at, actually? This is actually me, my self-portrait. So we have three foundational parts of our visual effects and animation program: 3D modeling, animation, and compositing and visual effects. And this is more the modeling area, and it's the area that is actually one of my background strengths. If you see behind me, that's a friend of mine, Joe Siegenthaler. He and I went to graduate school as sculptors, and I've hopefully cross our fingers he'll be able to actually come back and teach with us. I'm trying to get him to teach with us this summer. He's a pretty busy guy. But this is, this is traditional art. This is sculpting. This is kind of the things you would learn if you just took a pile of clay and started, you're asked to form something that's recognizable as a human form. And human form is the most difficult thing there possibly is to do, especially if it's a likeness. Like even self-portraits are actually fairly difficult to do.
Chris, what program is this?
This is called Zbrush, and I'll actually do a little bit of a demo in Zbrush, and I'll go into a demo inside of Blender.
Cool.
And Blender is a free program you guys can pick up for nothing. And actually, some of our students are actually doing a lot of their sculpting inside of Blender. They have phenomenally great sculpting tools in here. Again, it costs you nothing. Zbrush is still the standard for as far as this is used for Industrial Light and Magic, Weta, the big studios, the Mill here in Chicago, as well as Frame Store, places like that. Game studios use it, and it's just a very high-powered piece of software. So I encourage anybody who wants to get into 3D modeling to get this. You can also get Sculptress, but I've been moving from Sculptress over to Blender even more. And it's just as an incredibly powerful tool. So I'll go through the step-by-step process and kind of show you the first few weeks of a typical sculpting class. And the sculpting class is about 2.5 years or maybe even 3 years into your program. Actually, in the modeling program, if you're modeling emphasis, you'll get Sculpting 1 and Sculpting 2, more advanced level sculpting. And the advanced level modeling classes will also incorporate sculpting. Even in our texturing class, we oftentimes will texture in a sculpting program and bring those textures inside of a program like Painter or a Substance Designer and build materials using these sculpted forms too. So it's incredibly useful, incredibly helpful, and it has applications across the industry. This particular form you're looking at before here, this is actually one of my students did this. This is one of their first projects they get in sculpting class, and she hasn't taken a sculpting class ever before, never touched ZBrush, and we told her to go find a bust from antiquity. I want something Roman or earlier, Roman, Greek, maybe the Renaissance, possibly, but something of antiquity, and replicate that as closely as they can. Because they'll actually see in the process of replicating something out of stone, they'll see how the stone sculptors used stone to create something that was an abstraction from reality. These are designed forms. These are not, if I was to sculpt Brad looking at him, there's a lot of complexity to the human form. And if you use some of these guys to influence you, and they'll influence the way you sculpt. And this is actually something she did. This is like her third iteration. We have about 3 weeks or 4 weeks in this first project to get through the process of learning the software and taking from a ball of clay all the way to the final shape. And I think I even have some, if I look through my older files here. We do the full figure too. This is probably is one of mine here. Yeah, I think it's one of my earlier walkthroughs. So the second project is going through the entire form, getting the entire human form. We start with the bust first because sometimes I think the bust is actually a harder thing to do. But we also get into clothing. We get into the entire human form. So an endeavor didn't do the head because we'd already covered the head, so I just went right into the body.
So Chris, is it important to study like muscle and bone structure for all of this?
Absolutely, yeah. We have figure drawing classes that we cover. They'll get the figure drawing classes. They'll get the first of all life drawing classes first, figure drawing classes, little traditional techniques, and then we instead of going to clay or plaster or things like that, we go right into this material because it's so flexible. But we start with the very, very basic forms. We start with something like this, with just a block out of the form like that, real simple shapes, getting into the largest masses and working our way up and adding a few more details as we go, getting the flow and the feel of it first, but also where the muscles attach and where they connect, where they originate and insert, the origin and insertion points for muscles, things we get into that kind of conversations, adding fingers to it. Just a finger alone is enough to kind of talk about like what is involved with just a finger. So there's a lot of details they have to really look at, but not just the details, but the overall what's called the gestalt. They have to see the entire form from a distance and be able to see the whole piece coming together, then work their way in to the more more minute details until they're all the way up to the point of putting wrinkles in their elbows. And but they're we go over the larger forms. And again, I'll discuss that here in a second with the sculpts. And part of the process too is to go from that to, they take it inside of Substance Painter. This is actually a texturing program we use, and they can add textures to it. They can wrap. They have to retopologize the whole thing, which I'll show you again in a second. Rebuild the topology, the polygons on top of the form, and then UV unwrap those, which will you get into UV unwrapping as you get into the basics of modeling. Then apply these textures onto the surface of them, and then in this case here, I have them export them out to. This is in a game engine, so this is actually in a AAA game engine called Unreal. So this is an asset that they could actually put inside of a bust that they could put inside of one of their scenes. So we could take it all the way to Unreal. We don't stop inside of Zbrush. They learn the entire pipeline. Everybody goes through the entire pipeline. So we bake the normal maps in here. They bake all the other surface maps like occlusion, ambient occlusion maps, and curvature maps, and thickness maps, and world space normal maps, and all that kind of stuff. And even taking those out to back into Maya too. They actually could even start modeling something in Maya, sculpt them, and add detail to it inside of ZBrush or Mudbox or Blender. Take it back over into Maya, which is kind of another pipeline too for visual effects work. We're taking it into Houdini too, which is another option as well. Or this is actually Unity too. I'm actually getting into Unity myself, so we'll be taking inside of Unity and building up this. Using it's called the visual effects graph here, but just taking into game engines and building environments for games is kind of where many of our students find positions to in the industry. Before I go too far, does anybody have any questions? I can't quite see the chat when I'm sharing for some reason.
I'm all over the chat. If anyone has questions, feel free to type in about anything animation or visual effects. We just wanted to give you some stuff to look at. This isn't going to be a long session. We're probably going to go to 3:40 at the top, maybe 30 more minutes. But Chris, if you just want to show, because I'm sure a lot of us are sitting at home and Blender is free. Can you just show us some sculpting and your approach to it?
Sure, I'll do it once inside of ZBrush. If you have access to ZBrush, it's $450 for the program, but you never have to pay for an upgrade. And once you get the commercial version, it's $900, but it's no upgrade price, and you can rent it as well. But I'm just faster in this, so don't mind. I'm just going to do a quick job of doing the sculpt. So this is some things I teach them.
Cool.
Actually, I'm going to turn on symmetry because I can actually move the polygons around symmetrically.
Would love to see it. And Chris, as you're sculpting.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you a couple questions. This is coming from some of our guests. What do you think the biggest difference between Maya and ZBrush are, if you had to say?
Oh, they're two different applications. There's actually very little overlap between the two of them. You can probably model hard surface models, like model a car or some any kind of couches or even humans to a certain extent. But you can't just like I'll show you here in a second
Yeah.
what I'm doing inside this mesh. Let me make it a poly mesh real quick and turn on my Dynamesh. So this Dynamesh here, if I just look at the mesh here, this just becomes like this kind of polygon soup, and I can just move around the polygons without thinking about the polygons. So if I go here, I'm just going to increase the width here on this thing and then resize it. Just go ahead and do that. Sorry, and Control N for new. Sorry.
It's like there's a lot of shortcuts.
Yeah, Zbrush is a little bit of a beast as far as its shortcuts and how it operates, but it is super powerful. I'll show you why in a second. It gets pretty obvious what you can do. So I'm just moving around these polygons, but I'm kind of just not even thinking about it. I'm just moving around basically just the mesh, just like clay. I don't have to think about it. I'm just moving around. And first of all, I try to, like in the human head, human form, I try to say just make it like a bicycle, like a motorcycle helmet shape, and just get the abstract down first. And they don't have to think about the technology. They don't have to think about what their machine is doing, where the polygons have to be laid out. They're just moving around form like it's just like it literally is clay. So I can just go into the side view here, and I can kind of push in the temples here and kind of push in the jawline there. And just look at it from a very abstract point of view. So this is a great experience for our young students who've never done the human form. Like, where do you start with the human head, which is the most difficult thing to start out with? And just that basic shape like that is 99% of the human head. And you've got this little form over here to kind of take a look at it. And these little silhouettes over here, this little silhouette view in the new version of Zbrush is nice. You can kind of see it right there. Like, you can look at the silhouette forms and sort of gauge your way through what you're doing. Sorry, let me turn this off there. There's several tools. I only use about this many tools. There are a lot of tools I can use. These brushes here,
Wow.
Fracture and inflate and morphing and move elastic and snake hooks and all kinds of stuff. But I only use about 8. And oftentimes that's, you'll walk in, you'll see a bunch of chisels at the chisel store, at your sculpting store, but you only buy like 5 or 6. You only need a couple to do what you do, because you know exactly how you work. And just having it all there is nice, but I only need a couple. Now, this guy over here, Joe Siegenthaler, kind of taught his students this little trick, and I love it. Just do one cut right across the center of the head. I'm turning perspective on, so I can actually see from perspective view. Like right down the center of the head, that's where the eyes are. Midway between the top of the head and the jaw is where your eyes are. People tend to put them way up here, but they're actually almost right in the middle. So you put a cut right across there, and you put another cut at an angle like this. 2 cuts. And then if you look from a distance, that actually is most of what your detail kind of centers around that. And I always push, this is something Joe always said too, just push the gestalt, push the overall look of it. Don't go into detail yet. We want to get the structure of the human body, which is a lot of bones, the zygomaticus process bone here, the temporalis bone up here, the parietal eminence over here. You have all these different parts. Those are the jaw, the things that don't change in the human body are the bones. Male and female will have different kinds of bones, and young and old will have some variations, but overall they're going to be more similar than they are different. And we'll cut right there, and suddenly you have a lot of your head is actually finished here. And if you can kind of get the feel, just like sculpt not the eyes, but sculpt the form around the eyes. I'm going to up the resolution a little bit on this Dynamesh, just a little control downstroke, and now I've got way more polygons to deal with. Just that view right there, you can see the number of polygons. And again, I don't have to worry about polygons. They're just there. I can just kind of ignore them for right now. I'm going to use the same Damien standard cut. This is my favorite brush here. I'm sorry, I get really excited when I sculpt, so I talk really fast. So if you want me to repeat something, just tell me to talk slower.
I'll do that. We do have a good question, because these students are starting in the fall. Are there any programs you recommend downloading before class? I know when classes start, you're going to go for everything, but what to just kind of dabble in before we get started? That was Joey's question.
Yeah, I would say Maya would not be a bad thing. And I'll show you some stuff in Blender too. Cool. Blender, you can do a lot of the same kind of stuff in Blender. I'm just going to go really quickly through here because I'm I'm going to go fast in here and then go slower in Blender, because that's actually something you can pick up for zero money, and Maya you can pick up for zero money too. Now, if you notice right there, it's kind of made these little holes where the eyes go, and they literally, the Romans would drill into the stone and drill these holes for the eyes and for the mouth. And that's kind of the same thing we have our students do too. Just like drill those holes in there and place them in the right locations. These are midway between the, where the pupils are, straight down below. And that kind of gives you your mouth. Again, before I go any further, I'm actually going to sculpt. I'm going to sculpt away. I'm actually going to carve away some clay. So it's important to learn the reductive. You subtract. This is a subtractive as well as an additive process in sculpting. So you can actually, Michelangelo carved out his forms. He did only subtractive work. Here you have the advantage of doing additive and subtractive as well. I'm just going to use the shift key, and you can kind of smooth out some forms. So right there, I made my lower lip without too much trouble. Use the move tool, one of my favorite tools. Again, I only have to work on one side, not the other. I'm going to push out these eyes. They curve around the eyeball that's inside. It's going to push them down a little bit too. Get them all straight like that. So the corners of the eyes go really far in. I'm just going to make my draw sets a little bit smaller. Push these in pretty far. And right there, you have most of your structure. And depending on if it's male or female, or if it's there's some variations in regionality too, which are always nice. There's always some variation in human form. I'm just going to give them a little more that parietal eminence, that forehead. I've got a pretty good sized forehead. I think it's some genetic responses.
Yeah, that's a great forehead.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of creating that forehead, but I'm also creating the forehead by sculpting away the forehead too. So use those little clay tool. I can go in there really nicely and kind of carve away, the inside of his eye here. The trick is,
for me, I'm someone who loves to sketch. This could be kind of intimidating. How do you help, your first year students get the hang of this?
Speed sculpting. I tell them just do something in an hour and just repeat yourself. Just keep repeating yourself. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. And don't worry about messing up, because it's a throwaway. You can do another one, and do some stuff every day. That way, if you mess up, it's just a day. It's also messing up sometimes. It's just experimenting and having the freedom to experiment, try something new, try a way you've never tried before. Like, I'm gonna just force myself. If it really does mess up, that's awesome. At least I was giving it a go. Don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated, because literally whatever you do is all building up to the final, which is eventually you'll just sculpt without even thinking about it. I'm gonna switch my brush here to one of my favorite. There's tons and tons of brushes here. You can use a lot of them, but I only use a couple. Like this little smooth stronger, I can really smooth. It just like obliterates detail. I love obliterating detail because you can kind of just go back in and sort of see it in the hole. I'm using the clay tool again. I'm just going to use a little control. I'm going to just downstroke, brush his nose in like this. If you control click, you can reverse that brush and use the move tool. I'll click right there. I'll click the rotation to reset it, and then just pull the nose out. And my students get better at this too. They don't just like sit down and go, I know exactly what you're doing. I have to talk them through the process over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I don't mind that. I don't mind the process of talking through, because they're just starting out, for goodness sakes, you got to give yourself a break. You're not just going to sit down and immediately be like Joe Siegenthaler over there, which I literally walked into a studio when I started at Northern Illinois University, where we both got our graduate degree. And I was just so intimidated by his work. And he was the one that basically told me, knock it off, because, you just got to be you. Your path is not my path. I've already gone down this road, and you've got to go down that, you've got to go down your road.
Now, Chris,
it's different than mine. Yeah.
Chris, I heard, given the pandemic and everyone staying at home and production slowing down, that there's still a big demand for digital artists and 3D modelers to create content.
I'm literally getting people looking for animators right now, because there's people looking for animators, because all the production is stopped. So we're doing, there's just a ton of animation that has to get done, and they can't. There aren't enough animators around. So if you want to become an animator, now actually would be a good time to to be doing this. So, you know, my approach is always like, don't think about the negatives. Don't think about like, oh, you know, times are terrible. Why am I doing this? There's always going to be there's always going to be a time for you. And if that isn't going to be the thing, then just try some different skills. I'm teaching myself programming so I can do augmented reality stuff right now. I'm teaching myself JavaScript and, you know, jQuery and 3JS and all kinds of cool stuff because I want to keep myself, oops, sorry, move that. I'm so fast sometimes I mess my little shortcuts down here up. Okay, so you do that. I mean, I love this part. You just grab the neck right here by masking this part out, control clicking it into invert it, and then using the move tool. And just moving the neck down like that just creates the form. And that mesh down there is completely, there's no stretching of the polygons. The polygons are nice and smooth. It's just brilliant. And again, I'll show you how to do that stuff in Blender so you can actually see how that works. I'm going to use this little tool here to get the shoulders in. Click that, hit W, Alt, click and drag, and then move that out like that. There's your shoulders. Use the draw tool, smooth all this stuff out. Overlap there. So it's very flexible. It's even, you know, you don't have to put armatures. Like I was a sculptor in clay, and you have to really work the clay, you know, carefully. Otherwise, you know, if you're coil building, they have a coil building their clay class, ceramics class. That was me, you know, me making. There's a sculptor over there is about 7 foot tall over about on the other side of the computer here. But you know that took careful, slow coil building construction. It was so time consuming and tedious, and I love it. I still love doing that. Just put this over like that. But it was so time consuming. So you would have to really think about gravity. And here you don't have to think about that at all. You just like blip, 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 you know, throw in the sternocleidomastoids there. Just grab the chest section, hold it, Alt, click, hit W, and move this out like that. Or just use the move tool. Just the move tool with a big, huge brush. You can just grab the chest, just pull the chest out. Sometimes I'll tell my students, just pull this whole section out like this and just grab it, grab the mass there. Just pull the, you know, pull the form around the way it needs to be. It's so, you know, so flexible. Put his trapezius muscles up here, like that. Smooth it all out when I'm done. Get rid of any detail I don't want. Something like that. Push this in like that. Clay tool is marvelous. It just is like a piece of, literally just like a piece of clay. Hold the Alt key down, you can kind of carve away the clay like that. So you just mass out the form super, super fast.
Chris, what's the difference between making digital art for video games versus putting it in a feature film?
Less and less these days. It's getting more and more. That line is being blended. I want to answer the first question a little bit more. Like Maya is actually completes the picture. You can rig the character in Maya. You can animate the character moving around. You can add textures from Paint or some other source, light it and render it. So Maya's more of the finishing package. So this is kind of a one-trick pony where it does one thing beautifully. It sculpts like it's clay. I don't have to think about technology or polygon count or how my polygons are moving. I just move the clay around, and if it's close enough, good enough, and I can always come back and tweak it later on. But I don't have to worry about topology flow, things like that. Which you'll learn in our program. Just sculpt the darn thing. And if that body's too big, then look at it from a distance and kind of go, you know, just push those arms there, push the back out more like that. Get the neck up there like that. Push the head down like that. Push the, you know. Just be free to kind of experiment and play around.
What if I wanted to give that guy horns?
Oh, you can either model them separately and stick them on, which is kind of cool. Looking in here, I can actually create I can go here and then append and add in a cone. So this cone is here. If I I'll click the cone, which is here. I can move this thing up. I can scale it down on these axes like that. And rotate it around and scale it and move it around.
Wow.
That. Now I've got these separate objects. And here's a cool thing. I'm just go over here and do a Dynamesh on it, which is there. Now I've gotten rid of those polygons. Yeah, before there were these long, skinny polygons. I just hit Dynamesh. Now they're just like this retopologized, kind of soupy stuff, which is cool. But polygons there like that. Hold the shift key, I can kind of smooth all that out. And here's a cool thing. I don't know if I set this thing up properly. I should have probably straightened it out a little bit more first, but let me do this first. If I can click on this guy, I can go down here to these deformers, and I can do like a bend arc. Let's see. I tend not to do this too much in. Let's see, which way is it? There you go. There you go. So I can put a little bend on them like that.
Cool.
Then accept that curvature and then go back in, conform it over like that. Move it over into place. And then if I want to mirror it over, there's a little thing over here called mirror weld, which is under geometry, modify topology.
Any questions, even if it's about something we're not showing right now, the industry, Chris has been in the industry for so long, feel free, ask it in the chat. This is supposed to be laid back. Chris, we probably have about 20 more minutes, but you know, keep going for whatever you want.
Actually, I'm just gonna go into Blender, because in Blender, and you're recording this, right? You're recording this and sharing with them? Cool. Great. Yeah, I always record my lectures too, so for my students, they can take a look. So in Blender, what I did, I just simply made this. I'll make a new file. I'll start from scratch. And don't say this one. So if I start from scratch, and you'll actually start when you launch Blender, and Blender's again for free. I'll give you a link. I'll send Brad a link, and you guys can check. Just check out Blender 3D and download it for free. I'm going to add a little mesh called a cube, good old cube. I'm going to scale this thing up right when you first make it, or if it's in there. It should just be in there when you first open the program, but I'm going to go ahead and scale this up a little bit bigger. So it's good to start with a big version of the cube. I'm going to delete my camera. I don't need that for right now. So camera, delete. I'm going to go over here to the modifier, click on the cube, go to the modifier. I'm going to add a modifier to this thing called subdivision surface, and I'm going to add a few more of those guys, and then I'm going to apply that modifier. Go back to object here, and I'm going to apply the scale. So it's good. It's always a good idea to make your scales 1, 1, and 1. So there's scale 1, 1, and 1. And over here, just check this out. Object mode, go to sculpt mode, and now you have some of the same tools you had in ZBrush, and they're going to get even better and better. In the new version, there's a bunch more tools that just came out. Still in beta, so I'm not really using it right now, but it can be pretty powerful. I'm just going to use the grab tool, which is the same grab tool as we saw before. And again, I showed my students this. I showed them in ZBrush and I showed them in Blender. And some could afford Blender or ZBrush, and some couldn't. Some already had it, some couldn't. So I was leaving an option for students who maybe have a little bit more of a challenging budgetary concerns, but understanding eventually you'll want to kind of kick in the dough for it. Yes, sir.
Day one, what program should they have on their
Maya? Yeah, get Maya, Maya, and get the Adobe suite, the full Adobe suite. So Maya's definitely the first one, and I would definitely get a PC, get a good gamer PC. I've got a Predator, Acer Predator here, but I've got an MSI upstairs. Those are the best machines. Bang for your buck, they're going to perform better than anything else. So this is all the tools for sculpting down here. I'm going to turn on Dino Topo, and it's going to re-topologize this mesh. So I'm going to move Brad's view down there so I can see. And turn on wireframe here. You can actually see the geometry that gets created. And I'm going to use the same tools I had before, which is this little, I'm just using the sculpting tool. Instead of add, I'm going to put in subtract. And for the fall off, I'm just from smooth to sharp. And do the same thing I did before, just this little right click and just hit this radius, bring it smaller down there. As I cut in here, it'll add topology as I need it. I'm just going to turn the setting for Dynatopo up a little bit higher. So I should bring it lower. So the number of pixels that'll collapse or subdivide as it needs to go, you just add the polygons as you need it. And the closer you are, actually, the tighter the polygons count will be. So you can do that. I'm turn this back off again. So you can kind of see the topology of how it's working. So it's pretty spectacular. It's just about very, very close to ZBrush in many ways. The shift key works the same way too. We can kind of go back over there and.
Chris, we have a great question.
Sure.
This is coming from Hannah. How do you practice this? No idea just how to start. Yeah. I know you have guide videos that I would love to send out, but you know, we see you doing this, you know the program, you know what to do, but if I just log in, it's kind of hard to just pick it up and go. So how do you recommend just starting?
I've got two of my former students, both of them. I've made a bunch of videos in Sculptress and ZBrush, but two of my former students both made videos on sculpting in Blender. Wes, you know Wes?
Yep.
Over at CG Cookie, his group made a free version of their sculpting in Blender, little videos, which are awesome. And one of my students, he was over at Columbia in Chicago. He's actually a teacher over there, but he's a student from a long time ago.
So how do you access these videos?
I will give you links to those.
Okay.
I'll give you links to both of those.
Okay.
And you can take a look at them.
We're going to send you an email after this session going through different guides and videos, ways to get started.
Yeah. And you also have this one too. I've got one I did in Sculptress. The entire thing is in Sculptress too. And that Sculptress is actually even an easier program. I'd normally do that one, but I was kind of excited about using this one instead for today's demo, because if you do get into Blender, it can have some really cool, very, very powerful features that you can use for all kinds of things. So Blender is actually more like Maya, where it can do everything, anything and everything.
We just had Justin join. Justin, thanks for being here. Ask any questions that you want. You know, we're just doing some speed sculpts. Chris is showing the different programs, Blender you could do at home. Chris, do you have anything, you know, I don't want to break up your flow, but further down the pipe, like a detailed model, something that'll just intimidate the crap out of us?
I do have one in ZBrush. I have more of my stuff that I do for myself in ZBrush. I got a dragon in ZBrush.
Yeah, I'll look at a dragon.
Okay, hold on. Let me get a dragon. Let's see. Hold on. Move over a little bit. So I did this one for a guy over in Mexico. He wanted me to work on creating a video of sculpting and then rigging a dragon inside of Houdini. And I'm just gonna find out Control O. See, I'm not even saving the file I did. That's how more I care about the process than the product.
Yeah.
Just learning is the most important thing. So in here, let's see, might be in my files. Oh, hold on. I think it may have been on my other machines, so I'm gonna have to quickly just do a quick search here on Dropbox.
If you don't have it, that's fine.
Yeah, good old. I can show you here in this JPEG file.
You have
I've done a lot of
that say dragon on it.
Good. I've been doing a lot of dragons in the latest.
You know,
these are the dragon rig test here.
The whole thing.
Let me see if it's in here.
Okay.
Backup dragon rig mix. Sorry.
All good.
Yeah, these are all the rigged versions of it.
Okay.
So I can find it on Facebook.
It's all right. If you have anything else, Feel free to pull it up.
Okay. Sometimes it takes a little while to.
Or you can go back to your other sculpt.
Oh, here's a render test here.
Yeah, let's see that.
Not the 3D version, but there's. Oh, actually, that's not mine. That's one a different one I did.
Okay.
Actually, here's a video of one I did. This is one I sculpted and then I rigged it up and we did an animation of it, and it ended up playing in a film called Thrill Ride. So this is actually one I sculpted in Zbrush.
Yep.
It was not supposed to be realistic. It was a ride come to life. So it was kind of cartoony, meant to be cartoony, but actual, physically there. So that was all rendered in RenderMan with motion blur and composite into the scene for a film that we were working on. And so that character was in there several times. Let's see here. I could just do this. I can just open this. Yeah, let me open up the dragon.
Sure. As you're doing that, we got a great question. Can a sculpture be exported to a OBJ file?
Yes, actually, that's how these came out. These dragon rigs. These files here. Let's see, 10, 11. So these are probably OBJ files out of ZBrush, and then brought into retopologized in Masada Maya, and then the textures baked onto it, and then those textures baked in using Painter. I think I was using it, or maybe I was doing the normal maps instead of ZBrush. Those normal maps and all the materials I made instead of Houdini. Okay. And Houdini, I could actually add fire and smoke, but I was doing this rigging process inside of Houdini.
Yeah. Do you recommend Houdini as a program?
I do, yeah. First of all, it's very inexpensive. You can afford. I pay $200 a year to use Houdini, so it doesn't cost very much at all, and it's a great value. You can actually use that for actual commercial work. It's what's this here? Good. Sorry. Let's see if it's in here. I put some stuff up online. I don't really download it onto this machine just to keep it kind of fairly clean.
Big files to store.
Yeah, a lot of files. So this here is in Houdini.
Okay.
Give it a second.
Yep. Chris, would you say Houdini and Blender an industry standard?
Houdini more than Blender at this point. Blender is being thought about by the industry, but it's not being necessarily used for it. Why is this? Sorry, this is something completely different.
Whatever you could show is fine.
The problem is just getting the darn files here. Just open up the incorrect file here.
All right.
Try to retest. Okay. There's a demo I actually did in Houdini where some character was actually kind of being destroyed, being torn apart, using several different little tools we use instead of Houdini. There we go. There it is. Sorry, I got the wrong. A quick student demo is in my folder. Okay, so this is the actual dragon rig. So here is the rig I made inside of Houdini, or inside of Maya, and this is the rigged version.
Why did you do this?
For this project I was working on, for a training video I was doing for Verimix to Great. So this is something I sculpted inside of ZBrush, and just a kind of initial rig. But his feet. This is a kind of earlier version.
You sculpted that, but Chris, obviously dragons aren't gray and smooth. You want to add like scales, color, all that. What's the next step?
next step is to create a material, a shader system, and apply that on it. I thought this one had it, but I guess it doesn't. It's not the right one yet. This is an earlier version. This is the Dragon Geo. Yeah. So I retopologized this. This topology here is the low resolution, the low poly version, and this is the one you can actually rig. But you can bake the textures from one onto the other. Like this is the process you use this this program called Substance Painter to take those meshes in, bake the normal maps from one to the other onto the from the high poly detail onto the low poly.
Great.
So let's see. Try one more time. It might be in my previous files here under recent.
And for everybody else, I know we're getting close to the end. We just wanted to bring you all together. This is just a great way to ask questions. We're stuck at home. Obviously, we're going to send out guides for you to do this stuff at home, free programs. We have a great question in class. Do we jump right into it, or do we get a chance to learn about the software? So, Chris,
you learn by making it. So, yeah. So in Maya, the first thing you do is you in the Maya modeling class, you start right in just modeling something pretty simple. Learn the tools as you go, but you build a scene. You build a little environment using very simple primitive objects. We don't just show you the tools and here's the theory. This is like, okay, now you're going to make what I'm making, and go. And it's a bit daunting, but that again, the thing to remember is that you're not alone. Everybody else is doing the same thing you're doing, which is making mistakes, messing up a little bit, and just trying your best. Put this here. So like in going back to Blender here, you can do the same thing we did in that fancy, expensive piece of software. It just takes a little bit longer. Like I'm not as fast in sculptures as I am in ZBrush by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm not too bad. I can get in there and use the little clay tools. These are all there's a clay tool right there. There's clay strips, which I like even more. There's brush sizes. It's the same thing instead of ZBrush. You can work on very low resolution detail, and pretty soon, you have this extra level of high resolution detail. So you can just again, not even worry about the polygons. Let the computer worry about the polygons. You just think about what the form is going to look like. And later on in Maya, we learn about flow of topology, or what's called edge loop, and getting the right kind of because you have to retopologize this to make it look good in a low poly version. And low poly versions are a bit trickier to make because you have to be really careful about topology flow, things like that. But here you don't have to worry about that. So it's a kind of a different mental state. You just worry about, does this look like somebody you're trying to make, or does it look human at all? Is it, am I somewhere on the right track? And again, we just keep poking at it and keep moving stuff around until you get the jaw in the right place, get the face the right proportions. You can move stuff like pushing things in, pushing things out, getting the right profile.
Awesome. So, and Chris, say, I want to have him move his eyes and talk. What program do we use to animate our models?
We do that instead of Maya. So Maya, or even Blender. I could retopologize this inside of Blender and do it there. In our school, we teach Maya because that's what the jobs are as far as the industry goes. But if you learn Maya, you're going to be able to pick up Blender, no sweat. And some people learn Maya in our program. They turn around and they're really successful in Cinema 4D, another program, or Houdini. Like that's the program they want to use. So we teach you how to learn too. We're not just teaching you how to use this piece of software. We're also teaching you how to be comfortable with any software you sit down to, because they're in essence they're all kind of the same. When you get right down to it, it's going to be your creative. The creativity is the hardest part. Eventually, you're going to be like, oh, I get the software, and I won't teach you any more of the software. You'd be like, I would be teaching you, okay, now what are you going to make with this? What's your creative expression? And they'd be like, almost everybody to a person, my students are like, oh my gosh, that's much harder. Like learning the software is so much easier. All they want to do now is learn software. I've had to tell students, stop learning software and just make something.
What should we start with, Blender or Maya?
I don't think there's any reason to pick either one. Try both of them. We're going to be teaching you Maya anyway, so maybe it would be a good idea to kind of try Blender out, because we're not going to have any classes in Blender. And you can take that, and that's your tool to have for free forever and ever. I don't think there's any downside. I go back and forth between the two of them. So eventually you'll be like, oh, you eventually will be popping around using both of them, or trying something brand new that's out, that just came out, and then that becomes your software. Like Cinema 4D, there's another piece of software that's really popular and extraordinarily powerful. And many of our students use that too.
Do you see any new programs coming out, or are Blender, Maya, they always stay up to date?
There are always going to be new pieces of software, but I don't really care so much about that. Like I wouldn't worry too much about the latest and greatest software. The software is not going to solve your problems for you. In the end, the big takeaway is your software is never going to solve the problems that you'll have as an artist. The software will just be there it'll cause more problems than it'll solve. You have to sit there and work through its idiosyncrasies and workflow problems, and sometimes the solution is going to be, I go back and forth between Blender and Maya, because in Blender I can export what are called GTFL files, which are GLTF, OpenGL transfer files that will go into augmented reality applications. So cool. I'm using an augmented reality app with my my partners over at M1, which I'm doing some work for. Nice. And they are doing all kinds of cool stuff with phone, web-based augmented reality applications. And it's amazing how Blender just does that. And Maya's sort of behind the times. Maya's sort of it has its strengths, and it's used at Industrial Light and Magic and huge game companies and everywhere. But for this one application, this one program is the.
Do any of our guests want to see Chris add a ridiculous feature to this character? Feel free to type that in the chat. He'll do it.
Yeah, I can't see the chat, so you have to tell me what the chat's doing. I apologize. For some reason.
We got a question from Joey. Does the school, when you show up day one or start your class, do they give you the software to download? I'm pretty sure you should be getting something in the mail or an email telling you what to download. How does that work, Chris?
Yeah, just go to students.autodesk.com. So go to Autodesk and find the Autodesk student license. You can actually just pick up anything you want to from Autodesk for free. You sign up with your email address from the school, or if you have even if you have a high school email address, or just download a trial for a little bit. Hopefully, I don't know if they're getting an email this quickly, but maybe if they can download something like that. They can get Blender for free anytime they want to, but as soon as you sit down for your first classes, there'll be a link in the syllabus which software to download. Yeah. So you'll be shown and told where to download it from. But just Autodesk.com. Autodesk gives away all of their software to students for free use. That's one of the things that they do
Joey
really well.
He wants to see a handlebar mustache put on this guy. Are you able to do it?
Sorry, I can't do that. I have just no idea what a handlebar. Yeah, of course I can do it. Now we can either sculpt it as a separate object or just build it off of the mesh too. So
what? Build it?
Yeah, I can build off the mesh a little faster. I don't think we have enough time to do anything too fancy, especially not in Blender. I'm not really. Yeah, so yeah, we'll do hair. We'll go over hair and how to sculpt the hair features. Again, I'm a little slower in Blender, so I'm not quite. I'd be done by now if it was ZBrush, because I'm just more used to that tool. But it's not too bad. So we use these clay strips here. Clay strips are great for just like laying on like little chunks of strips of clay. So we bring the strength up really high, and I'm just going to bring my my detail here, my number of pixels. This detail is like how detailed the mesh will be when I put it on there. So I'm just going to pop in a mustache form, just build up the structure of it, kind of following the form of how the hair grows. It's an old guy, probably comes out of his nose a little bit, you know, like me. If I grow a handlebar mustache, it would just be coming out of my nose mostly. Sad thing about aging. Stay young, guys. Don't ever get old. It's not fun. No, it's fun. Actually, it is fun to get old. I was just my junior high art teacher, my favorite guy ever. He was a non-vet, so I gave him hats off and hey teach, how's it going? I was just talking about a friend of mine over a campfire, social distancing with a campfire, about how this guy taught me so much about art when I was a kid. He's had me go outside. I love the story. He had me go outside after we were in the studio in our school, and I'm from Alaska, and where I'm from, it just rained 1,000 inches a year, like 200 inches a year, a lot of rain. And he had me look up. It kind of looks like his mustache actually. He had me look up, and he says, "What color is the sky?" I said, "Well, it's gray. It's a gray sky." He goes, "No, look around, look closer, look over there. What color is that gray?" I went, what do you mean? What color is that gray? Like, what color is that gray? There's different colors in the gray. I said, that gray over there is kind of bluish gray, right? And this color over there is like pinkish gray. I went, oh my gosh. I never forgot that. I never forgot like what he taught me about just looking carefully at the world around me. And anyway, I wished him a happy Memorial Day and thanks for his service, not only as a veteran of the very terrible war for young kids to have to go through. And because they were all kids back in the day, but also as a teacher, what he did for me and my brother. My brother became an illustrator. He's an illustrator for Magic cards, Magic the Gathering. And he was also his teacher as well. So thank you, man. At some point after this whole thing is over, I'm going to fly out to his place in Washington, and he does glass blowing and clay. I mean, all the kind of stuff. He's like me. He loved doing everything. So there you go. Is that pretty good?
Awesome. So, Chris, I know we're about to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, Chris Tedin. Like I said, guys, this is the first of many events. We want to keep you entertained and just keep everyone coming together. So if you want to see more of anything, definitely reach out to us. But we'll keep you posted on more events. Chris, maybe we could do another one of these in June and have people come back, showcase some new stuff. But again, we just wanted to give you guys a break from your normal routine and bring you together. We're here for you for whatever you need. So don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. I'm going to put my email in the chat. You could just email me any questions you have for myself or Chris, and we'll get right back to you.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Hold on. I'm putting my email in. Chris, any final words, advice?
Yeah, just don't be afraid of what the challenges are ahead. Just don't be afraid of learning new things, and don't be afraid of what we're going to think about your first stumbling attempts at something. We've all been there. We've all had the stumbles. We've all tried, and it's not been the greatest, but we all enjoy the process. And also, we're also very supportive of each other too. I really try to encourage everybody to be really, really supportive of each other, because we're all struggling to kind of learn the same kind of thing, and we're all in this together too. So get to know each other, and reach out to me with any questions as always.
More demo events to come. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes.
Bye.